Hey, good morning everybody. So I'm starting this video on a different part of my normal loop than I usually start videos. And that's because right now I'm into a pretty decent headwind. And normally on the Insta360 X4, the audio would be pretty much unusable unless I kind of velcroed these little foam ear things on each of the microphones. More often than not, those dead cats would kind of rip off as I was pulling the camera out of my pocket, and the shot would basically be unusable. Now, the reason I started this video while I was moving faster today is because I'm not shooting on the X4. I'm shooting on the new Insta360 X5 360 8K camera. And this thing's got this like amazing built-in wind muff, like built right into the camera, so you don't need to add any third-party stick-on things anymore. And so hopefully the audio quality of that little intro there actually sounded pretty decent. And keep in mind, this is the camera basically just straight out of the box. I've got no attachments or peripherals on it, and I'm using the stock settings as well. So anyways, got a little bit ahead of myself there. In this video, we're going to be looking at the new Insta360 X5, but because all the bigger, sort of more popular channels have already got a chance to review the camera, in this video, I'll focus less on like digging way down into the specs of the camera and just give you kind of my real world experience using this camera over the past few weeks. I'll talk about all the upgrades since the X4. I can hear that weed whacker probably really clearly. All the things I like about the camera, and of course, the very few things that I dislike about it as well. Pick up the speed a little. I'm actually going into a pretty mean headwind here, and normally at this point I'm just cutting the B-roll because the audio is basically just white noise. Curious to see what the audio sounds like right now as compared to the X4. Woo! Picking up some speed. Yeah, I'm going about 20 right now, maybe a little faster. How does that wind sound? Oh geez. Here, elephant. Yeah, I actually have a hard time believing that this audio is going to be usable right now because I was going pretty fast, and you know, the camera's just right out there in the wind. So very quickly, these sort of highlights for the X5. It's now got a bigger sensor, which if you don't know what that means, it just means that there's a larger surface area that's collecting photons inside of the camera, and that translates to better low light performance. It just means that even in the dark, where there's not as many photons zooming around, the bigger sensor can pick up more of them, so the image looks brighter even when it's dark. In addition to that, like I already mentioned, the microphones are actually internally protected from wind now. So you can see like the screen where the microphone is beneath on the camera, and below that there's some sort of like mechanical wind protection, so that we don't have to rely as heavily on sort of wind reduction in post-processing. Big one too is that the X5 now has removable and replaceable lenses. So what that means is that up until now on the X4 and earlier, you could put like a little lens protector on, and if that protector got scratched, you can go ahead and replace that. But the actual lens was sort of baked into the camera's body. So if you ever scratch the lens on like an X4 or an X3, the camera is kind of done. There's nothing you can really do to replace that lens. So now with the X5, you can actually replace the entire lens. So even if you drop the camera, scratch the lens, you can get a replacement kit and just swap out the lens and it's brand new basically. The form factor of the camera is basically the same as the X4 as far as dimensions and the actual weight, but the X5 manages to include some new chips, some AI chips, which are doing some post-processing in the background. I'm not going to pretend to know exactly what those chips are doing. And then also the X5 manages to increase the battery capacity over the X4 as well. So even though the form factor has remained the same, the functionality and the capabilities have certainly been given a boost. Now, talking specifically about battery life, I actually fully charged this camera before the last ride that I did, like a nighttime gravel group ride around Fullerton, and I was doing a bunch of testing on the X3, the X4, and this new X5 on that ride. I got home from that ride having shot 53 gigabytes worth of footage, and the battery was still at 44%. And that was a few days ago. Now this morning when I was getting ready to come on this ride, I hadn't actually charged the camera since that previous ride, but so far the newer, bigger battery has been pretty impressive, I'll have to say. A quick little loop on Arroyo San Miguel here. My easy, 1 hour morning ride basically. Morning. There you go. Pretty loose. Pick up some speed right here. Yeah. All wind in my ears right now. How's that sound to you? Oh, it's freaking hot today. All right, so how many of the upgrades are incremental? There's always kind of like the highlight reel, the X5 is this % better, this much better in this regard, and so forth. But how many of those elements are actually impactful to your everyday use? Well, starting with the battery has noticeably more capacity than in the X4, so that's a really positive thing. I can basically get through like a 2.5 3 hour ride, turning the camera on and off for a couple minutes at a time here and there throughout the ride, and come home with plenty of battery to spare. So really nice upgrade on the battery. The built-in sort of mechanical wind reduction, for anybody who does any vlogging at higher than walking pace like Cyclists, it's actually kind of a big deal. It really makes a difference on the audio quality, which actually is going to make a lot of your other footage more usable than it would have been with the X3 or the X4. And then lastly, I haven't really talked about the bigger sensors because, like I said, a lot of the tech channels will go into really pixel peeping, like side by side between the X4 and the X5. But based on my Tech Tuesday ride a few days ago, just huge difference between the X4 and the X3 versus the jump up to the X5 in terms of low light performance. I'm actually working on a video where I do more of a comparison, not super pixel peepy, but kind of just like a real world use case using the X3, X4, and the X5 without all of the camera nerd tech specs. So I'll have that video down in the description if you really want to dive into like low light performance between the X3, 4, and 5. But the bottom line is the X5 actually does perform much better in low light conditions, which again, depending on what you use the camera for, could be a really worthwhile upgrade. Okay, so basically the camera kicks ass, and if you're still here and you saw the sponsored video logo up in the corner here, you know that I probably was going to say really good things about the camera. Insta360 is sponsoring this channel for the year of 2025. Specifically, I'll be putting out 4 dedicated videos over the course of 2025, so hopefully not too disruptive to the channel. Again, I only take sponsored videos on things that are not directly related to bikes. Video cameras are tools that I use to create videos, so I'm okay doing sponsored videos on cameras. Anyways, no review video would be complete without the things that I dislike about the camera, and the X5 is a truly great camera, but I wouldn't consider it perfect. One thing that has actually bugged me since the X3, which I really wish they would address, is when you use quick capture, which means you've got the camera set so that you don't have to turn the power button on and then hit record. You just hit record and it starts recording almost immediately to the last settings that you were using. I use a quick capture feature almost exclusively because when I'm riding a bike, I just want to pull the camera out really quick, do a quick shot, maybe do some talking head, and just put it back in my pocket and keep riding. To me, that's been the least disruptive way to incorporate some video without really losing the joy of the ride. But the thing about quick capture is once you start recording, once you hit record again, it will automatically turn off the camera so you can just put it in your pocket. But it gives you this sort of "are you sure" warning window. So you've got to wait for a 5-second countdown before the camera will automatically shut off. And the idea here is maybe you accidentally hit record and you want to cancel turning off the camera, which this 5-second delay gives you an option to bail on the turn off function if you really want to. For me though, what that means is I might be riding at 15 miles an hour. I took my camera out, did a quick clip. Now I hit record again to turn off the camera. Now I've got to sit there for 5 seconds and wait until the camera actually turns off before I can stash it back in my pocket. Otherwise, the camera will stay on and it'll eat up more of the battery. Now I know 5 seconds doesn't sound like a long time, but for me it kind of is just this irksome feature of the camera that I notice every single time that I use it. So I really wish they'd give you an option to toggle off that, whatever it's called, that 5-second delay before the quick capture shuts off. So that's actually my biggest gripe with the camera, and it has nothing to do with the performance of the camera. That's something that they could easily fix with a firmware upgrade. I just wish that they would do it. Other things to note is that the quarter 20 mount on the X5 actually got a hair shallower than the X4 and the X3. And the reason I know this is that in our online shop, we sell these horizontal mounts that are 3D printed for 10 bucks, so that if you want to run your X5 or X3 or X4 sort of in a horizontal fashion, like on a chest mount, it really takes up a lot less real estate than having this like protrusion coming out of your chest. The horizontal mount is something that we've sold in the shop for years, honestly, before Insta360 even came out with their version of it. But the point is, the thumb screw that we use on that fits the X3 and the X4 just fine, but it kind of bottoms out in the X5. So we've actually had to modify the design of our horizontal mount just slightly so that it'll work with all the X series cameras. But that is something to note. If you've got other mounts that use a standard length 1/4-20 mounting screw, the X5 does have a slightly shallower 1/4-20 mount. And then the last thing, it's not really a gripe. This is really just like a wish at this point. The X3 was actually significantly smaller in footprint and in weight than the X4 and the X5. Now, obviously, to improve the performance to the degree that it's been improved, the footprint of the camera had to be increased slightly, but it is noticeable. So like ultimate dream camera, let's say in the X6, keep the same exact functionality as the X5, but somehow just reduce the size of the camera itself. That would just be awesome. Is it worth an upgrade over the X4? For cycling, I would almost say yes, just because of the wind reduction is kind of the main one. And if you're doing cycle vlogging at any point where you lose sunlight, then the X5 can still give you a pretty decent usable video, whereas the X4 would kind of top out as soon as the sun goes down. So in my opinion, yeah, definitely if you can afford it, it's definitely a worthwhile upgrade. Again, of course, if it's So actually, a moment of honesty here, the X5 battery actually just did die on me. But again, that's, after shooting a whole night's worth of footage, starting this ride with 44% of the battery, and just kind of running it over the course of this ride, it just finally ran out, which actually brings up one last gripe that I have with the camera. As I was shooting that clip, I looked up and it said 7% battery, which means, you could probably get like, hopefully a minute or two, clip out of it, but it actually shut down due to low battery, which I think it has an auto shutoff feature when the battery gets down to about 5%. And to me, that's not okay. They should just build that into the battery protection and let it go down to, quote unquote 0, so that the user actually knows how much they truly have. Knowing that once it gets to 5%, it actually shuts off, that kind of like skews everything and kind of compresses the actual battery life. So there you go, one final gripe with the battery of the X5. Okay, so that's gonna do it for this one. If you have any questions about my experience with the camera so far, just drop them down below. I'll be happy to answer as many as I can. Thanks again for watching. Thanks for subscribing to the channel. If you haven't already, see you next time.